everybody, this is Tony.
And this is Paul, and we're coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast, where we discuss the ongoing lives and issues of people with developmental disabilities to spark positive change in the field.
And we have a lot of fun doing it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. Today we have a very special guest for you. This is Torri Wright of BEHCA. Did I say that right? I thought I said it right.
Yes.
All right. So welcome to the show, Torri. Before we get started and talk about the software you've worked so hard on creating and all that fun stuff, what's your background in working with people with, disabilities, or how you kind of got into this, wanting to create this software that seems super helpful?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will try to give you a Cliff Note version.
Sure.
I have been working in the field of, I'm going to say challenging and complex behaviors, because it's a wide variety, for going on 24, 25 years. So I first started out in a boys' home where there were sex offenders, also disabilities, but adjudication. So it was that's where I started. And that eventually led into working more with public education in different avenues, like specialized programs, where I would work with neurodiverse kiddos and different other disabilities as well. And later on, I went back and got my master's in education, and then taught in the public sector here in Portland, Oregon, for about 6 years. And around the 6th year, I started getting frustrated with our systems and seeing all the success that I was having, but getting a lot of questions from administration and how I was doing it, even though they kept filling my class and my caseload. So I also saw a huge deficit in data, and specifically the data that drives whether or not we're effectively meeting goals. So specifically related to IEPs, at that time, I would have my paraprofessionals chase around my kids throughout the day and scramble on paper, and we had charts and all kinds of things. And then I became this Excel queen when I'm not even an Excel person. And then from there, when I left teaching to become a behavior consultant here in Oregon, I saw an even deeper deficit, because the state allows for contracts that we go in, we write these assessments, we give supports, we create goals, but there's really no follow-up, especially in family homes. And then in foster homes and group homes, it was really hit or miss. So I started searching to see if there was any kind of app. I couldn't find anything that even remotely came close to what I wanted. The other piece of this is that the way I see behavior is it's communication. It's not something that I want to just sit there in the back of the room and go check, 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 which is traditionally how behavior is reviewed, observed, and so forth. I tend to look at the environment, all the different things that are influencing that person and how they feel, how they show up. So that is the very long way of saying how I got to this point of I want to create something. And I happen to be working in the same office as somebody who had an app and software development company called Germinate. I know, it was just very serendipitous. And he was really eager to create an app that would help people. And I said, well, I have something. So we started dialoguing. I had several different focus groups with people here locally. And then we also sat down and talked with a bunch of developers that he worked with to see what is the potential. And that's really how the inception of BEHCA started. It was very grassroots. Michael and I have, we funded it all. So it is 100% us in terms of just the development and the growth. And throughout that process, I've written a book and curriculum. And actually, I just spoke to a publisher yesterday for my second book. So I'm really passionate about this subject in terms of looking at individuals as the individual that they are, but we all experience the world so uniquely different, and how we show up we have a rhythm. And we often don't pay attention to that rhythm. 90% of communication is nonverbal, yet we've become so heavily reliant upon the words coming out of our mouths. And BEHCA is really something, so it stands for Behavior, Environment, Health, Comparative Analysis. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But it really encompasses, in a lot of ways, that BEHCA is so simple, but yet what it stands for is really complex. And I would say that the app is very similar in the user face is really simple, yet the complexity is vast. You could use it in a lot of different ways. And so we've been very excited to be working with different organizations and learning how they're using it to develop the app in better ways in this particular community, because I guess the last thing I'll say is this community is often mediocrity is accepted. And oftentimes softwares and different supports that are given, you can see that in the development. And that was something that we didn't want to do. We wanted it top notch. We wanted it to be super easy. And it has been a really beautiful labor of love.
Hey, to your point, sometimes the most complex things need a simple solution. And so I take my hat off, especially not having an angel investor or anything for you guys to finance this yourself. That is a very huge undertaking, and, hats off to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was reviewing kind of the overview, and your website's really clean and easy to kind of get a gist of what the software is capable of. And, I have a background in anthropology, and when I was in college, we used a lot of similar software. You're tracking a lot of like keywords that people use, and you're trying to get to the point of like, essentially how people are feeling about certain situations and things like that, especially when you're talking like cultural anthropology. So I kind of was like, wow, that seems familiar to me in a lot of ways. And that software can be very, very powerful, even as a simple of a setup as you guys have, like a very like simple user interface. And you even incorporate like emojis and very simple things that anybody could incorporate down that path of, user friendliness and the power of data. What's kind of like some of the outcomes that you can hope to see if someone were to use this software with anyone that has like behavioral issues?
Yeah, so I would say the first piece of that is how they set up the data tracking. So it's all customizable to the person. So when you go in, you'll see that there's these little drop-down boxes, and they're huge, and we have tons of, well, not a lot, but defaults in there. So how you customize that is really going to determine what your data ends up looking like. What I always recommend to people who are not data hungry or understand that world is start with simplicity. And back to your point, Tony, with simplicity, I also really strongly recommend people not to put a whole bunch of stuff in the crisis section, but instead look at the warning. So, and most often people are really confused when I say that. They're like, well, what do you mean that there is no warning? It's 0 to 60. And I'm like, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So there's always a warning. There are always influences. And so really encouraging people in those first couple of weeks to observe so that they get those warning signs. And then when you have, I typically would say 60 days of data, because that first month you're kind of trying to figure it out and you're creating a habit of tracking and so forth. So I'd say 60 to 90 days, you can start to see pretty clear trends and patterns. And the dashboard that we have, I don't have it to show you, but the dashboard that we have, we've put up some really quick analytics for you to be able to see what's up, what's down. But also on the dashboard, the bar chart will tell you, is there a particular time of day? And then if you're doing any kind of environmental influence, what is that environmental influence that's happening? And we also track things like weather, barometric pressure, even the moon phase, because those things we've noticed, again, my 20 plus years, things have an effect. So those are automatically tracked with an API. So we just feed in that weather app into our app, and based on your location. So you can start to see, is this really relative to somebody who maybe doesn't really like gray skies for 3 days in a row, or the barometric pressures like here in the Northwest are up and down all the time. And I have a tremendous amount of sensitivity. That's another part of this app. I personally have a lot of sensory stuff. And so I see the world and feel the world in a very unique way. And so there's a lot of emphasis on that in the app to be able to make sure, because if I wake up and I have a headache because of the barometric pressure, my day is going to be really tough. And I have words and I have a lot of capacity to say what I need. There are people who I support who don't have those. And so when they're hitting, when they're self-injurious, it's a communication. So paying attention to those components can literally change how we support an individual. Because if all of a sudden we're paying attention to the environmental factors that are influencing, and we're also paying attention to just kind of their trends and patterns throughout the day, now we're getting to see through their eyes as opposed to our eyes into their world.
That's so crazy because we're in an age where, you know, there's so much that we can do with data, and it's so important because I would have never thought of that. I have a friend of mine who's a professor, and he's always talking about those barometric pressure changes as well and how they affect him. And I had never heard of that before until very recently. So yeah, it's amazing what things can like cause people to act different ways. And heck, I might be sensitive to it. I have no idea. I'm like notoriously terrible for paying attention to how I feel myself. So yeah, that's really awesome. And, you know, is this kind of like a joint effort between, you know, the person that is being tracked with the software and the person that's maybe assisting them, or how does the app work overall? Is it like a give and take on both ends?
Yeah, so I tend to, the majority of the people that I support are kiddos, and more recently I have a lot of really little kiddos, so it's kind of harder to have them be involved. However, I also work with a lot of teens and young adults at different times, and as much as I am able, I ask them questions. I don't even ask the individuals that are supporting them anytime that I can. And if maybe their communication is limited, then I sit in their space and I interact with them, and I gain a lot of information just by witnessing their day. And that's where I find the warning signs and so forth. But we also have a part of the app, you mentioned the emoticons. We have a part of the app where if I'm working with a youth who is really working on emotional regulation, they can track themselves. So, and I actually encourage them to do voice to text, so they can write notes, talk notes. And then I get to see that information in comparison to what's also being tracked. So it gives their actual perspective, swear words and all, and, you know, versus the staff perspective. And there's some things like they can track their water intake, their screen time, activity, just different things like that. You can turn those on and off. But this app was really designed with the number one focus being collaborative, because the way I'm going to see a person is going to be uniquely different than perhaps you or Tony or anybody else that's working with someone. And all of those people coming together, we might get closer. But if it's just me and I'm the only one who's putting the data in, it's going to be super biased. So, and that was something that I noticed a huge amount and was very frustrated with in education, because if I ever had a kid that needed an autism diagnosis, there was one person who came and did the evaluation and the observation. And so it was very limited. Yes, there was a psychologist, but the observer was one person. And then that informed the whole group of people. So I always felt like, well, they're here for 30 minutes. How can they know? What are they getting in 30 minutes?
Exactly.
I have a hard time getting enough information in an hour. So that was my observation, and part of the reason why I felt like BEHCA was so important, because it's a 24-hour if needed, and it can go from school to home as well.
It sounds to me like you're really creating an interface that keeps people responsible, the individual themselves, the family members, which I love. I'm like the hugest person when it comes to making sure that we're self-sufficient. The people that we serve can be more self-sufficient. So with that, like, where do you see yourself in the future? Are you trying to put this to county boards to try to make it, a foreseeable state-funded kind of thing? Or, like, what's the goal for the future?
Well, at the beginning of 2020, I was slated to speak, and we were exhibiting at a number of conferences across the country. So my goal was to get it out as far and wide.
Right.
And we work with group homes, foster homes, and schools. So those are three pretty big audiences. And we've had a hard time going, oh, we just have to focus on this, or we just focus on this, because the second we start focusing on, say, group homes and foster homes, schools start contacting us.
Yeah.
So it's been this very interesting experience. I'm not really sure that I have complete clarity on what the future holds. All I know is that right now, everything is changing so much, and this feels like such an important thing right now that I'm really focusing. In fact, I'm cleaning my slate, so to speak. I used to have this big calendar of every day I had a different project that I was working on. And some of those projects have now kind of gone to the wayside because I've realized how important my entire focus needs to be on BEHCA. And it's not just the app itself, but education, getting more videos out there, speaking to more people. Because again, we've bootstrapped this. This is just Michael and I. We don't have the millions of dollars for a sales team and marketing. Maybe one day.
We're right there with you.
Yeah.
But it's gaining traction. In fact, we have a number of people in Australia, a number of people in Canada, and all throughout the U.S. So we're getting there, and it's giving me hope that, number one, people are actually seeing behavior in a different way, which is awesome. That makes me really excited. And number two, that this is providing a tool. I can't remember which one of you said this, but it's providing, I think it was you, Tony, there's an accountability with it. It brings a higher level of integrity, I think, even in terms of the support. So that's my hope. It's kind of my hope for leaving a legacy, is like dropping seeds of change in this industry, because it desperately needs to happen. And I also have a firm belief that these are individuals who can be productive members of society. So we need to be doing everything we can to figure out what they need to show up in a higher quality of life.
Yeah, it's and the cool thing that I kind of got the vibe of when we were looking over it and everything is it's kind of like almost like a Fitbit tracker for like mental health in a way. It's like really cool what you can do with it and customize it. And like the only reason, that's the only thing I have to compare it to myself that I use like regularly is like that it gives you all these options, like, oh, you want to make sure you're eating healthy. Well, you can track your calories, and they make it super simple for you to scan packages and things like that. So, that's really helpful. And, this kind of the way things are going nowadays, mental health is kind of like a big issue that's very much more talked about than it's ever been, as far as I've seen in my lifetime. And so I think that's very important on your end with that. Have you seen any, personally success stories from people that have used this that have been like life-changing to, maybe having terribly aggressive behaviors or whatever, to being, like much more able to function day to day without having to worry about having stuff like that happen?
Yeah, I have a number of scenarios that there's been successes that honestly I couldn't have predicted. So in other words, the parents will use it in a particular way, and because they're paying attention to something that maybe I pointed out, now it's changing the way that they're actually responding to their child. So in one way, BEHCA tracks data, but because it also starts to shift the perspective of the person tracking, now they're interacting differently. And they're also seeing, oh, wow, this behavior isn't because they're just being rude or they don't like me. There's something going on. So I, as a care provider or parent, need to investigate. So that piece has been exponential. In schools, there's a school district that I've been working with for the last couple of years, and the paraprofessionals, as well as the staff, have completely changed how they interact with kids that are more challenging, that are prior to using BEHCA were getting kicked out of class, getting sent home on a frequent basis, and having really explosive behavior. And when I was able to go in there and say, hey, what are the warning signs? And all the staff were like, I'm not really sure. It's 0 to 60. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about that. Once we were able to gain some perspective on that, within 2 weeks, this kiddo who was getting kicked out every single day and usually sent home 2 to 3 times a week, no more.
Wow.
I mean, they totally, and this young lady, she was in third grade and she was refusing to read. Now she's participating, and all she needed was a little sensory input. She needed more visuals during transitions. She actually needed to be pulled out when there was kind of chaotic times, and food. Funny enough, we realized, oh, wow, food is actually a really big thing. So it's interesting. And I had another family who was able to identify how much dairy was impacting their daughter in a significant way. And then after about 60 to 90 days of completely getting it out of her diet, again, the behaviors continued to go down and down, but now her communication was starting to increase because the inflammation was down. So her daughter wasn't so worried about all the migraines and the constipation that were happening. So it's really amazing to me. I had no idea that that's what this app was going to do. It was just kind of, okay, this is my brain. Let's put it in an app and see what happens.
Yeah.
But it's been really cool to witness how parents will often come back. I had one parent early on say, it wasn't about the data that I saw so much as it really changed the perspective of my daughter and what was going on with her. And and she said that she was catching herself not being angry. Instead, she was looking to see what was influencing what's going on. So it allows us to take a step back and go, I don't need to be reactive. I need to witness the situation to understand more.
Yeah, it sounds like basically what the end result of the app is doing in the simplest form is like an empathy building app, because you're learning, oh, this person's not just mean. There's actually things that are happening. And, that's a huge common thread also that I've been seeing nowadays. A lot more people are talking about empathy rather than just, this ingrained like American sense of like, just shut up and deal with it kind of thing, which we're also used to. That's how we've all,
And I'm the type of person, like what we were just talking about, when it's eating, like I think that's the first place we should always go. Because 9 times out of 10, if I'm mad, it's because I'm hungry. My wife, oh, he's hangry. He's hangry.
It's really true. So it sounds like it's very, very powerful, and I can see it as being like a very useful tool, especially in our industry, because we deal with behavior a ton, and Tony's been doing this for his basically entire adult life, and it's really seems to be.
And I go to the back, back in the days where it was all those papers, like you would get thick reports on somebody, and you would have to write even thicker one detailing every little bit of stuff, and then it goes to a person who probably has to look over 50 of those, and you're hoping that they catch the quote unquote issue, which what we're talking about is the communication behind it. But I'm sorry, I feel very, very close to this subject.
Yeah. So is there kind of more detailed things that this thing can like break down into like a lot more detail than just basic tracking results or something? I mean, how can this data be used over a long period of time to like either come to new insights or whatever it takes to kind of make everyone's life a little better? Because it sounds like that's the end goal, is to just make everyone's life a little bit better. Yeah,
increasing that quality of life. Well, I am a data nerd. I've come to learn this. I did not think that was who I am, but I really love looking at the data. So I always recommend a year if people are willing to be committed to a year. And the reason is because you actually get all the seasons, you get all the holidays, you get all the transitions in a year. 2 years, super great. Even a year and a half is super great, because then you can kind of compare if you're if you've had the time to integrate different interventions and supports to see how well are you meeting those goals. In situations like group homes where you're tracking goals, I think that this should be ongoing. We actually have added MAR, which is the Medication Administration Records, which is all associated with Medicaid and Medicare, so it's federally regulated. We also added incident reporting, and we have an area that you can upload the documents. So we've made this to where it can kind of be a collaborative tool, but also does multiple things. But long term, the thing that I have found really powerful is when you have individuals who have intellectual disabilities and a mental health component that is not identified. I have had several individuals that I've worked with that have been denied mental health supports because they have developmental disability. And I don't know how it is in Ohio, but in Oregon, it's pretty tough here to even get them into the hospital and in any kind of an evaluation, because the moment that they see that they have any sort of disability, they automatically go, oh, it's just behavior. Yeah, everything is behavior, actually. So we need to decipher what it is fitting into. And there's an organization called National Association of Dual Diagnosis, NAD, on the East Coast. Are you familiar?
I've heard, yes.
Okay. So I went through a training with them a couple of years ago, and I really appreciated their perspective because they actually wrote a DSM version, so a diagnostic manual based on intellectual disability and how you would look at it differently. So keeping that in my mind, I really went back and looked at BEHCA to see, was there anything that we needed to add? And one of the things that we didn't need to change a whole lot, but one of the things that I've started telling people is the long-term data starts to tell you if there are particular trigger points throughout the year. A lot of times you'll realize, oh, that was actually when this kiddo had a failed adoption. Okay, April, that's kind of a big deal. Or wow, okay, we knew that this kid going into the holidays always had a problem, but we didn't realize that actually started the very end of October. Yep. Okay, that's really important information, because now next year we can really start to change that. I've had several foster kids who blow out of homes during particular times of year, and once we were able to implement BEHCA, and if I had even just a few months of data showing them, the next foster parents, I would say, hey, listen, here are the 3 times during the year that this person is going to have some big behaviors. We're going to get through it, but this is not all year long. And sure enough, we were able to finally stabilize placements because of that. But having that long-term data is so critical, because I learned in grad school, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. So no matter how much we say it, no matter how much anecdotally we have these theories, that's great. I want to see the data. And so the other piece of this is that when you're talking about foster kids or individuals who are in group homes who also attend schools, here in Oregon, it's really hard to advocate for those individuals sometimes, because schools just kind of pass them through, just do the thing. But when there is somebody collecting data, that is extremely powerful, because the data advocates for the kid and for whatever goals are needing to be adapted. So it's kind of a long way of saying there's a lot of power in substantial data for over a period of time, especially when we're talking about individuals who are more complex. And, you know, I've worked with so many youth who will randomly change, it seems like randomly change their behavior. We'll get something sorted out, we'll provide an intervention, and next thing you know, they have this new behavior, and you're like, what in the world? Well, you then start to realize, oh, we actually changed a little bit of their food, and they've been more constipated, which probably means that their whole body and their nervous system is having some kind of reaction, and they're not able to verbally articulate this. And most kids don't say, hey, I'm constipated and I don't feel good, because they don't know.
Right.
No, even if they could, right? So those are things that I see BEHCA being so critically important, because it starts to inform us on a higher level in a way that I haven't seen other tracking I think it would be great if there was more, actually. I'm not afraid of competition. I think that we all need to start shifting the way we look at this, but I haven't really seen a lot of data tracking out there that looks at it from that perspective. It's more the tick mark tracking.
Yeah. Well, and that's pretty important too, because not to say in all cases that solutions are just as simple as changing someone's diet or times of the day that they need to be like have less sensory issues. It's not always that simple, but I would say a majority of the time it probably is very simple. Like I don't think a lot of people realize how important like diet can be into people's lives and how it affects their mood, or even like having, you know, especially where you guys are out in Oregon. I'm sure you deal with your fair share of rain and gloomy days. That's kind of like what you're known for out that way and up in Washington and stuff. And it's kind of surprising to hear the troubles you have with getting like diagnosis and stuff out in Oregon. And I can't speak for here in Ohio.
But actually, I mean, I can, at least in Northwest Ohio. We actually have a fairly good relationship from the mental health side and the developmental disabled side. I think it took a lot of work to get it there. The county board reaching out to a lot of the different facilities and having the talks, and then personally the agencies who service, like Friends for Life, for example. We speak to the doctors, we speak with the nurses, we speak to the psych systems and stuff. Like, we are advocating the best that we can. If it's not but it's not everywhere, like you said, and once the money gets in the way, once you're trying to figure out who's supposed to be billing at what time, and that can cause a problem. And so personally, my professional career, in the last at least 12 years, I've seen things change for the better.
Yeah.
And hopefully you guys can get that territory.
Yeah, we're getting there. Part of the training was also the state. It was a pilot program bringing in NAD to train a number of us professionals to then get that out there. But it's hard because you're trying to integrate so many different agencies, because you have mental health, child welfare, DD, then you also have hospitals, right?
Yeah.
And doctors and so forth. So it's trying to bring them all together.
Yeah, and so to kind of switch topics a little bit here, one thing, we like to use this as a resource for people that kind of, and when you say like the disabilities field, IDD, DD, whatever you want to call it, that's a broad statement. But you're specifically not just working in this field only, and there's a lot of unfortunately, it feels like there's a lot of people who don't think there's a great opportunities in this arena, I guess you would say, to become, whether it's successful or whatever you want to call it. And what advice would you give to maybe entry-level people who are just starting in this field to maybe, to get to a position where maybe you're at or where Tony's at, you're both in the CEO positions. How does that path look for someone who wants to just, to make this a career, make this a life for themselves, and also do something passionate or that they are passionate about, like what you're doing? It's great stuff.
Yeah. If the person is wanting to become an entrepreneur, I would say look for the problems, and there are plenty. And then determine what you could provide as a solution. That is, I think, business 101, right? Like solving the problem and show how you're going to solve it. And I would say beyond that, just working in this career, I had to refine what my expertise was going to be in, because what started happening is I am really, just because of the way my brain works, I'm really good at putting the puzzle pieces together. So I would see things really quickly. So people were wanting my input all over in basically a really broad spectrum. And there were certain areas where I didn't feel as comfortable, or I didn't as in solving the problem, because I wasn't as familiar. So what I started doing was I started saying yes to the areas that I felt like I had a much better understanding. So creating my own little niche, which was autism, actually, and fetal alcohol combined with reactive attachment. So those are two really difficult areas.
Yeah, I would say so.
Look, I've personally worked with many individuals in that area. And you know what? I have to take my hat off, because when you add the child part in there, that does make it so much more complex. I've been lucky to work with just adults, so I only have to deal with adults. But adding children in there, you got to do great work.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like they teach me. To be honest, that's where my education and even how we built the app, like I would just really pay attention to children. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Everybody has a rhythm. And, I'm not afraid, no matter how big the file is and how intense the behavior is. It's, okay, cool, teach me. Tell me what you need. And it is extremely rare that I'm ever in a situation anymore where it is volatile, because I'm there to witness. I'm super neutral. I understand what it means to be a co-regulator. So I have all these tools, and that is really what has allowed me to see individuals in the way that I have. And I think that, going back to that question that you asked, Paul, in terms of, advice, it's pay attention, witness. And to witness, that means you're in neutral. You're not evaluating, you're not judging, you're just watching. You're just learning how a person moves. Pay attention to how their body moves, how they speak, what their rhythm and tone looks like and feels like. Because that will start to teach you a lot. And the more you pay attention to these individuals that you're supporting, the more you pay attention in the world, and then it becomes kind of a second nature.
Yeah, wow. That's great advice, because a lot of the time, and especially if you're not trained to think like that, or if it doesn't naturally come to you that way, it is tough, because it's so much easier to say, "Oh, something's wrong with that guy. You're a jerk," whatever. And it's just way easier to do that than to sit down for 10 minutes and figure out, maybe there's something deeper here. And we see that so much with people. Like, everybody just like tends to have a tendency to write people off very quickly because of minor inconveniences or whatever. It's wild. And, we could go on for that for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. But we have something a little more fun to talk about now.
Yeah, I was just going to, Tony knows.
Yeah, I know.
We have a little game show for you, which our favorite part of the show. It's a couple of questions. So, Tony.
Rapid fire! So the point of rapid fire is I ask you 3 questions. They're set in a what would you rather do. You have to choose. If you overthink, which it sounds like you will, we will make fun of you in other podcasts. No, we won't make fun of you to your face.
Good to know.
But let me know whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Would you rather have to do everything that your company does now by paper for a week, or stuck in a VR world for 24 hours? Yeah.
I think do everything by paper.
Oh.
Yeah, smart. I would go the same route, man. VR.
VR makes me nauseated sometimes.
I'm about to say I can only do
awful.
about 30 minutes, and I gotta take a break.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather listen to the same Christmas song for a week, day to day, day in, day out, or sing Happy Birthday 1,000 times? Yeah, that's almost a math one.
Maybe this listening to the music for a week.
Yeah.
I could tune it out.
Oh my god.
Because if you look at it, the birthday song is like 2 minutes long. 1,000 times, that's a lot of time.
You wouldn't have time to do anything else.
Yeah. All right, last one. Would you rather fart while speaking at a school, or have a booger hanging during a Zoom meeting?
Oh my god.
I think fart while speaking at a school, because then you could make it a funny situation. I don't know.
The kids would cheer you on. I promise they would.
Oh my goodness. Here we go. We should start the show with that. Give you a chance to bail before we even get in. Like, you know what? I don't think I want to do this interview anymore. Well, thank you for being honest on that one.
Yes, thank you.
Wow, that one even caught me off guard. Wow. So
I was just thinking I had to answer quickly, otherwise you were gonna
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. Well, there'll be cool music playing and stuff. It won't be as dry as it is right now. I'll make sure it's more interesting. But before we wrap up here, I want to give you a minute here. Any closing statements that you have that you would want people to know about BEHCA or yourself or the business or anything, and then where they can find more, and we can put the links down below in our show notes and all of our YouTube channel and all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I think an important thing to note is that our company is small and we are collaborative, not just in the app itself, but we want to hear feedback, as well as we also want to make sure that agencies and organizations can get their foot in the door if this is something that they want to do. And if price is a concern, we are always willing to have a conversation about it. Because we are a small company. So, and really at the end of the day, we just want to change the way that we're supporting these individuals and bring a higher quality of life. And check out our website at BEHCA.com and BEHCA. You're going to put that below .com.
Yep, it'll be down below.
Yeah. And then maybe look out for the next several months. I'm going to be putting out a second book called See Beyond Emotions. So that'll be cool.
I have to read that. Tony and I are huge fans of reading.
Love the books.
And audiobooks both. So definitely be checking that out. So thank you so much for coming on our show. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
And everybody that's listening or watching, make sure you go check it out. Again, the website is down in the show notes, all that fun stuff. You can check it out. There's tons of great videos, tons of great resources. And Torri, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. I hope to stay in connection.
Definitely.